Hold on a second. Something was definitely wrong. Hold on. Not sure what just happened, but that wasn't right. Let me try it again.
I have a pop-up that says it's streaming live on YouTube.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not sure where it's streaming though. I'm not sure it's streaming on CreateAWorld, so we'll have to see. Hi, everybody. Zoom changed its settings again, and when Zoom changes its settings, I enter in a conundrum, wondering if you all are even able to see us. So here we go. We won't be able to check chat today because I'm the one that checks chat, and I'm on the call with Dr. Deb and with Liz Geyer.
Mm.
I want to start this is the beginning of a much larger conversation. I had originally designed it to make it part of a course, but I'm not. And I will tell you why. And I'm also going to tell you a story. And then I'm going to ask Liz and Dr. Deb to comment on it, comment on what they are, what brings up, what is brought up for them in reflection. I want to tell you, Awaken Your Being and me as Tantra Maat, that's my private work that I do with people individually. But we also have a collective, a wisdom cultural community called the Field of Tantra Maat. And this particular CreateAWorld is featured from people in the community, in the cultural community of the Field of Tantra Maat, and people they've met that are creating a world. So just to give you the background of where this conversation is coming from, the work we are presently doing in the Field of Tantra Maat is called Your Magician of Self, which actually brings us to why this call is happening today and why I've asked Liz and Dr. Deb to work with me over the next perhaps few months, deepening this conversation out past the edge. Okay. So in the cultural wisdom community of the Field of Tantra Maat, in the project we've taken on, Your Magician of Self, anyone can join anytime. It's like throwing yourself into a community and just riding the waves of the community and seeing what starts to occur in your existence. It's not linear, it's non-linear, it's not horizontal, it's vertical. It's so above, so below, not past to future. So way, a long time ago, I'm 77 now, in Kingsport, Tennessee, I was about 5 years old. We just moved there from Knoxville, Tennessee, by a beautiful lake, moved into an industrial town. And there was only one thing I was really clear about, and that was that whatever I was being related to as, I didn't know. So I didn't know myself the way people were relating to me. And it was very confusing. And one of my gifts and talents is the capacity to be out of body. I don't recommend it for years at a time, which is what I did. But being out of body is very helpful when you don't want to be traumatized. So I became an observer around 5 years old of kind of, for me, what's going on around this place and why don't I fit? But somewhere then about 11 years old, because I was separate from the world I'd been born into, and I was hearing a voice, and the voice was interacting with me in a very different way. And it was informing me by that, through those interactions, of what I was. But it was undefined. It wasn't like I could define myself, like I'm a girl or I'm a female or I'm white. It was just that in the voice's conversation with me, there was a clear experience of self that I knew fit me. So when I was about 11 years old, I began to fight. It was a psychological fight. Um, I fought for what I felt was real. And I fought very hard to not adapt to what other people were saying I was. In my case, and I know there's a psychological paradigm that will translate this a whole different way, but there's a point to what I'm saying. So my mother was a violent alcoholic, so we have that psychological paradigm, and called me bad names, bad names. But I knew I wasn't. And I think that that strange reversal of thought where all I knew was that I'm not that, create a platform for me in my early 20s. I started with Dr. White, a psychiatrist, who asked me if I was crazy. And I said, people think I am. And he said, well, what do you think? And I said, I don't think I am. And he said, well, I don't think you are either, but we have to get you to learn how to live with you. And have you ever heard about multidimensionality? Then I was 22 years old. I met Brian Christopher. He's on the Out Past the Edge podcast with me. And when Brian talked, even though the understanding of what he said wasn't there, at the time, I did not know, like I know now, and many of us know now, that he was in a quantum field. He was in a unified field of consciousness, which I promise you in the 1972s wasn't a common conversation. But in that quantum field, in that higher frequency field, I could begin to recognize myself. So I began at that point in my life, between 19 and 22, I began to speak, we could call it channel, from what I was present to and what I was aware of. So for me, I was a psychic, and I was a prophetess, and I was a mystic, because those words came closer to describing me than other words that didn't give me a place, didn't give me a sense of being filled with a self that was designed to participate in reality a particular way. At that time, I met Dr. Deb Merchant at the time. And I'll let her tell that part of the story. But basically, Deb and others formed a community around me, gave me a place, because I needed a place to discover how to fit in the everyday world with everyday people, not forcing me to identify myself in that particular container. So somewhere doing all that, I wanted to do a body of work, because I was aware when I did what we now call an engagement, used to call them psychic readings, and then the consults, now engagements with creation. I wanted people to recognize the nature of who they were, independent from the culture that they've been born into, the cultural norm, sorry, that they had been born into. So I knew about the self early on, the self that is not only undefinable, but it's multifractal. It's a multiverse beingness, and it's multidimensional. And over time, which I'm not getting into today, I began to find language, because language is the key to human magic. I began to find language that I could resonate with, that gave me a location in creation that allowed me to operate here outside of the limited, lesser, almost, I use Deb words, redacting personality frameworks that we seem to have to exist in on this planet up until now. So that was back when I was 22. That was 55 years ago. Is that right? 55 years ago. This year, after all that time being at work to awaken your being, but also to be able to re-identify yourself more accurately in the greater realms of creation of which you're a part, multidimensionally, multifractal, multi-persona, not multi-personality, but because that persona has information. It has a way to understand reality that it can apply in this limited reality in a powerful and constructive way. So now here we are. I have a body of people doing your Magician of Self. I talked to Deb and Liz independently. Liz and I did a YouTube video on the I, We, You, They, It. And Deb and I pretty much talk every single day as we're watching the Magicians of Self unpack and become present to the, not so much the identification, but the capacity for identification of self in multi-interfacing ways. In other words, a human personality, how that human personality is meant to identify itself is how it's interacting with whatever it's interacting with, whether it's interacting with God, or whether it's interacting with a deer, or whether it's interacting with your children, whether it's interacting with yourself. We are multifaceted, and we are a kaleidoscope of wonder and magic and awesomeness that I asked Liz and Deb, they're in this cold turkey, by the way, Liz and Deb to join me today to begin this exploration. There's nothing therapeutic about this. We are not standing for any kind of truth. We are not setting ourselves up as authorities, but I am a human being that's been paying attention to this for 52 years. And I'd like to now bring it forward in a series of conversations with Liz and Dr. Deb and see how it provides for you and see how you can be contributed to by it. Who wants to go next? Or comment on me, my speaking?
Liz, you want to go? Okay.
You go first.
Okay. Well, for me, yes, I've known Tantra since 1988. And we've worked together since that time in a number of capacities. But the common thread in all of it was to bring these ideas forward so people could grab hold of possibilities. So for me, because one thing I noticed was that everybody else who gathered with us had some version, some attractor, or several in their lives that were bringing them to the same reflections, observations, and explorations of self. And so this isn't a Tantra centric conversation like Tantra personally. She just was another unifying force, kind of, and very adept at bringing ideas and observation, articulating what she was present to in ways that gave openings to other people. And I'm also part of a body of work called Spiritual Emergence through Emma Bragdon with IMHU. And for me, this isn't the exact kind of spiritual emergence that Emma Bragdon talks about. But I've discovered it's been a very spiritual, emergent phenomenon, a phenomenon of awakening to ourselves, to discover that the dominant Western culture, has a pretty narrow slice of a definition of how to appear and be. And to become comfortable with I am of that and not of that, and discover who you are has been really quite a process for each of us individually and collectively. And discovering that it was a collective phenomenon was really, I think, a surprise. I think a lot of us came together thinking, I'm the only one, I'm the only one. And um, to find out it was a collective phenomenon amongst many has been really quite something. And I do think it's a phenomenon of identity, but not the way mainstream psychology talks about, or that it's a popular conventional term. I think it is a quantum. Identity is a much broader, uh, multi-dimensional phenomenon, really. So, and then how to live it and how to live it in a way that is harmonious and balanced with others. That's kind of where a lot of us are now, uh, in a way that, how do I say that part? In a way that, once people have done a certain amount of work, then other people can join in and they suddenly catch up really fast because it's not a mental step one, step two, linear kind of process. Um, so that's a real simple way of describing my overarching experience of these last, what's it been, 40 years? Well, whatever the math is, of 88, 2024 minus 1988. So it's leading me as my unique individuated self to really be examining a lot of aspects of the field of psychology because that filters down into society and tells people who they are, and it may not be entirely so. So I'm really examining a lot of that and how can that be rewritten? How can that be reframed and re-expressed in a way that frees people up? So I think that's enough for now to
And
give you
Deb,
a
just for a minute, because the reason I asked you and Liz to participate with me is not only because of what you're contributing to others, but also because I know that you didn't succumb,
yeah.
that it was easy, but neither of you succumbed. And so can you just talk a little bit about the parts of your personal journey that you can share where you were, because those of you that are listening to this and those of you that take listening to this and pass it on to your friends and family, we really are on a mission here. We're really on a mission as everyday people with everyday lives that aren't limited to the uh, constriction of being everyday people living everyday lives, but are able to be part of broader spectrums of reality that we can funnel into here on behalf of all life. So just any personal part of your journey, Deb.
Yeah. So I think mine was really parallel to Tantra's, but however many years later, because I'm a few years younger.
12.
Um, because I grew up in a pretty traumatic, dysfunctional household too, and was constantly told who and what I was or wasn't. That was an interesting part too. I was told what I wasn't. Um, and it was not just verbally, but in all kinds of the nonverbal ways. um, and somewhere back there, just like Tantra, I said, no, I'm not going to be identified this way. I don't think originally that I thought it in those words. but I could put those words to it later and just say, no, I decline to be identified. But that was, it's easy to describe that right now, but that was not an easy journey because there were lots of pressures from within me and outside of me to be what I was told I was or told I wasn't. Because one of the big ones for me was, who do you think you are? While also being told what I was expected to, you know, become. So it was, I don't know how to, it was real parallel to what Tantra said. How do I not be this? How do I get it out of me? And it was years. I mean, this was long before anybody was studying this stuff in a way that got to any particle of the public at all. So I was thinking, how do you get this out of yourself? It feels like I'm constantly pulling these big giant splinters out of myself. And if I pull the wrong one, then the whole thing's going to fall. That was like a constant kind of experience. And then then I also used to notice my perception, what I was present to. I mean, I remember me and my sisters were arguing, and one of us was in trouble for something. So my parents were in on it too. And all of a sudden, I could see we each had very different universes. And I thought, wow. Now, it didn't help with getting out of trouble. It didn't solve anything. But I found that fascinating. And I was young when I realized, wow, nobody's identity is the same. And I was smart. So I mean, intelligent. But so I actually thought those kind of words back then. And it was really weird. I also did notice I don't remember who did what or who got blamed or who got in trouble. In the end, we probably all ended up getting in trouble. But that was an amazing phenomenon that completely changed how I viewed human beings. We weren't all the same being, like one big blob of amoeba or something. And registering, that's when I could cognitively start registering, not mentally, but cognitively start registering the beauty around me. And that was really, really natural to me when I was really little. And then there's a kind of a blank spot. But the journey to, all right, well, then what and who am I? If I'm not that, no matter how much they yell and scream and say this is what's so, I know it's not. So what is? And that was a really, really hard journey. It still is. There's still aspects of it that's really, really hard. It and I don't know. It was helpful. It was helpful to know there were others. But in meeting Tantra and coming to know her and having my own awakening experiences, I knew I had a talent for recognizing wholeness and the God in all life, if you will. And I had a talent to hang on to that. And that's what I did with Tantra. That was long before I had any training as a therapist, but I had skill sets there. I had skill sets to tack in the wind, tack towards how to have internal wholeness become external wholeness. And then came the day when I had to do it for myself or start doing it for myself. And that wasn't very easy because a lot of times it's like trying to look at your own eyes without a mirror, you know? Um, so I don't know. It's the more I keep going, the more I'm at peace within myself as even if I can't say who I am like some overarching beingness, um, it's there's more and more, okay, I'm together now. I'm more of me now. And so now it's more of how do I, not disappear from the world? How do I be in the world but not of it? I still am here, so how do I, and I'm not meant to be moving off grid or outback Australia, or that's just not what's up right now. So how do I be self with other, including in places that doesn't have that recognition and presence? Does that does that kind of get at what you're talking about, Tantra?
It's what I was after. Yes, Deb. And two things I just want to bring up because whoever starts this journey with us, two things. One is I'm going to transcript it and it'll be on CreateAWorld Facebook, and I hope to get an Instagram up too, because this is our journey. And the thing that the three of us are interested in is this is years and years and years. And it's easier to say what we're not than what we are. And I suggest the reason it is easier to say what we are not, like I'm not that, rather than what we are, is because there hasn't been any cognitive articulation around it. It has not been brought to language. If you look,
And oops, sorry.
it's okay. If you look at the basis of our language, a personality, let's just say, it identifies with trauma or recovery from trauma or purpose or service. So in the field of Tantra Maat, you will hear people say Tantra's dragon is up, and nobody thinks a thing about it because they have learned to discern that aspect of dimensionality that they can identify and bring language to. If we were on the street or in a traditional store, we would think that they were just being cute, or that it was an acronym, a pet name. They can also say, ask Georgia, who I used to live with, she could also say, the guardian's up.
Hmm.
And it demanded very deep respect because not only was the identification of the dragon or the guardian up, but the powers and forces and presences and capacities and skills and those personas was up too.
Hmm.
That's what we're after in this. So that's the first thing I want to say. Hold to what you were thinking though, Deb. The second thing is all three of us acknowledge that either way it goes, it's traumatic. Whether you're struggling to identify yourself correct, it is a traumatizing experience. There's no way out of it. It is terrifying to consider that you are not of the society you were born into. From the age of 2, you have a primitive trigger in your DNA. What is it? Starts with an H, and I'll get it in a minute. It's a helix, and your double helix is a primordial experience of if you don't belong to the pack, you will die. That's about as primitive as you can get. So the discovery of one's own self, the ability to find language and to be cognitively aware, that means to be able to think it and to be cognitively articulate in it in a place where it can be heard, is a new horizon. We are in uncharted waters here. Go on, Deb.
Part of what I have focused on, interestingly enough, since I've got a skill set for recognizing wholeness, and everybody is intrinsically whole. A lot of people feel terrified if you point that out, though, which I discovered a long time ago. But like I have focused on, to use Tantra's example, there could be a lot of people that would say, oh, she's in her dragon, or she's being her dragon, or the phrase she just used. And they did not mean it well. So you could use the same phrase as a derogatory term, a put down, and as a way to funnel somebody back in. So I've also paid attention to what derails wholeness. And I sure wish I was further along than I am on that, but I'm not. I am where I am on that. But I pay attention to what derails wholeness and confines it and makes you doubt it and makes you have to work so hard to know I am that. And it's probably why I'm drawn to I love the kind of movies where I'm trying to think of one. So if all right, well, one is Sister Act or Sister Act 2, and there's a young lady who says, "I'm a musician, Mom. I'm a musician. You have to let me be a musician." And the mom is saying, "No, you can't be a musician because of these reasons." And I don't know. I love those kind of movies where people are just against all odds being who they knew themselves to be at whatever phase of their life, because sometimes it changes. And it's quite a journey. It's really quite a journey. But it's worth it, because like even though there's that DNA piece, and I'm not saying this to talk anybody into it, I just get excited. So uh, for me, it has been worth it, even to go head to head with that piece of DNA that says if you don't belong, you will die. Because that's real. But then at some point, I started to be able to realize, you know, first, there's power to create my own belonging with others. I'm not very good at that yet, but I'm working on it. And then sorting out that belonging creates, shifts the system, like systems theory. And Clan of the Cave Bear was a good example. So you shift the system, and that might be across, because I can notice things we did when the kids were teeny weeny. I can see the impact of that in them as adults now, or my grandson who's 14. There's ways that have been handed down in a certain way. And even all the, like I said, just to go back to the field of psychology, nobody was doing trauma work when we started this, or certainly not in a public way. So by the time I met Tantra, it had just begun. And then by now there's totally fantastic groundbreaking stuff because what was started in the 70s and 80s. That changed the system and changed what we were able to perceive and work with, which is now making a difference to huge numbers of people. So I pay attention to that kind of stuff and I'm looking at how to accelerate it. That's my focus and journey. My what I bring to the party. But places like what Tantra's describing of how we can gather and be is essential because people are waking up And, in the spiritual emergence community, I just realized this the other day, the Emma Bragdon and her lineage, they have a little bit more narrow, um, what did I call it? What's the word? Definition or expression, or they're working in a certain domain of emergence. Um, and it's not like rigidly limited, but you choose a focus and you work there. And I'm noticing that all of this other awakening could be considered part of that too. Because it completely changes how you see things, how you see yourself, how you orient and make choices. And I don't know, I think I need to stop there. Liz?
I'll insert myself here. So, waving in here. So my experience with, I'll start with my experience with Tantra. I've been working in the field of Tantra Maat since 2012. And it's felt like millions of years, which is awesome. Rather than 12, it just, that doesn't, it's incredible. Um, so, so for me, I was literally adopted into at birth a very conventional family. And, I was thinking as you both were talking today about, what kinds of terms came to identify me. Well, I heard old soul a lot. And I had an amazing Assyrian grandfather who said, she born that way. I hold on to that. Oh my goodness, because he saw me and he knew from a very young age that, there was wisdom there. And I always felt old in my skin. Um, so I was born into this family that was very conventional. You did things the way society said you should do them. And so I learned to play the good girl game, and I was very good at it, very good at it. And the other aspect that I had on my side was this innocence about me um, that helped me win the game. When I would get into trouble, I could play what I always term the rookie card because, oh, I didn't know. Um, I'm new at this, or literally, I was very, very, very innocent and very pure. And um, all along my path, there were those that saw that and said, never lose your innocence. So that was part of the identity game, that I knew that was a card I could play that would help me maneuver myself through a very challenging life that I knew I didn't belong in, just as you both have been saying. I always felt very, very different from my friends. I would waft it. I had really good friendships, but I always sat outside kind of the belonging. There was something about that. I knew I should go into the group and then I'd waft out of it. And I did that with many different groups. Um, and that because that's who I am. I'm part of the many, the we, the they. Um, and then so and then there was this other aspect that was this driver, this persevere, the person who persevered through anything, no matter what. Um, so as you've been talking, I realize, there are these aspects that have come along with me that have really helped me survive in this world that was very conventional, that I did not wish to belong to, that I was of, but not of. Um, and at a very young age, I knew that I was a teacher, very young age, even as young as age 5. And at age 8, I knew that I needed to be a teacher because teachers didn't know how to teach. um, so, so moving into my work with the field of Tantra Maat, yeah, there was a lot of trauma. Awakening has been a very traumatic, it's a biological traumatic event that you move through. And being in this field and being with this community has, they're, as many of us say, they're my people, they're my beings, we're all in this together. It's a very collective, non-judgmental place to be, and a very safe place to awaken into discovering all these various aspects of ourselves. So I think I'm gonna stop there for right
The two things I want to point to. One is, I think what makes the field of Tantra Maat wisdom cultural community maybe unique, I think Deb addressed it, is that bodies of work, like my body of work and the work I do, um, is my, activations, engagements, things like that. But all paths lead to Rome. And so Deb has her interest. Liz makes sure we get certain YouTube videos of the lady. You can say who it is later. Deb's at work with Emma Bragdon. I'm about to do biogeometry work. I was Sai Maslant master teacher for a while. So in the global community, the thing that my focus as the sort of figurehead of the community is that everything has a place. Everything that operates on behalf of life has a place. So as each person begins to self-discover, we aren't being funneled into a certain belief or funneled into a certain modality. It's going the other way, which we're spiraling out into more and more inclusion of what grants life and has life exist as whole, which is obviously Dr. Deb's interest, and bringing together the capacity to think and to perceive information in a quantum manner. Because if we don't do that, then all we're going to have available to us is how to survive. But the how to survive is not the same thing as how to be. And they can show up in the same place at the same time. But our need to be is becoming pandemic. The one gift that COVID gave humanity is nobody is a slave to the workforce anymore. Not nobody, but there's a quantum amount of human beings that regardless of the challenge of finance, they just can't go back into the system anymore. That basically uses us on behalf of others and not on behalf of ourselves, on behalf of ideas. In every society, what perpetuates that society is its structure of what it thinks human beings are for. So our society, our Western society, is about making it financially, status, purpose. So this separation from self is now working its way back to reconnection. It's working its way back to reconnection. So I wanted to get that said. I had a quote show up in my head, a Tantra quote, and when Liz was talking, and the Tantra quote, which is always a little arcane, that means sort of a little bit on the side of sick humor, was what's worth the trauma? If any way we go now is going to be traumatizing, then what's worth it? And Deb and I, we lived in Osterville, Ohio. We had a big husky, a Malamute, named Prometheus. We called him Permy because by the time he got his name out, he could be long gone. But we had a fence, electrical fence, that Permy loved to go through. And he would do this. And finally, the fence, the whole electrical field was 6 feet. So here'd go Permy. And he just loved it. He'd go all the way through. And then he'd sit on the other side, past the electrical shock, and stare at us until we had to turn off the electrical field so he could come back. So clearly, Permy had recognized what was worth the trauma. And but it is like that. We're an electromagnetic organism that is both spirit and flesh, both matter and ethers, both biochemical and alchemical. And there is a shock in restoration. And Liz said part of a quote that I have always said, enlightenment is a biological event. And it is a biological event. And as you begin to take on new things that you once had to dismiss to survive, it doesn't matter this life, another lifetime, in another dimension, once that starts being restored in you, it was a trauma that shut it down. It was a trauma that separated you from it. And you got to learn to be Prometheus. You got to be able to go through the traumatic effect of your separation from what you were once part of till you get to the other side of it. And then it just doesn't exist anymore. It's part of the magic of being human. Part of the magic of being human is when we're willing to take the distance, to go the mile. It literally transmutes the trauma into life force energy. Literally, it's part of our skill set. So I want to show something, but before we do that, I want to see if there's anything that came up in what I said for either of you, and then I'll want to show you a visual.
Well, my favorite that you talked about, with Prometheus. I love that. Oh my gosh, what a visual. Is the word I use the word composting. So I work with a group in the field of Tantra Maat to unpack. And I also saw this as like shedding layers of the old paradigm, right? I could just see like a lizard, shedding its skin. And that yes, it's traumatic, but that turns into compost. So our sitting in this trauma and being with it is both compost for what we're moving into, that next greater whole, and it's a superpower. That's the way I see it. So
Yeah, I'd agree about the superpower.
yeah.
And I've composted for years. And when Liz first said that, whenever that was, I had never thought about, well, how does a banana peel feel as it decomposes? Does it feel anything? I'd never thought about that. But then what you end up with is the best fertilizer in existence on the planet. I mean, it's called black gold, and the decomposition process. Anyway, that's just one thing that I noticed when she first said that. But as you all are talking, I'm realizing I have never put words to what has it be worth it. And I'm sitting here thinking, I don't think I can. I don't have words, but there's something in me that keeps saying, keep going, it's worth it. Keep going, it's worth it. And I guess I've never stopped to say, well, why? But now that I'm stopping to say why, what's there is I don't really know in the sense I can put words to it, but I know it is. I know it is. So I think that's all I want to say.
All right,
Back.
I'm going to share something. So we're asking, can you all see it? Oh, good. Okay, good. So we're making a request. We're asking you, we're inviting you to a party. Our party, not our party, the we party, the one right there. The we of the us, meaning all of you and us. Dr. Deb, is your email Dr. Deb without a period at thevitalpsyche.com?
Correct.
So it's Dr. Deb at thevitalpsyche.com. So this is the end game. The end game is to be able to comprehend what you're looking at right here because you're living it. I am that, and where I am that is what we're after. Today was a teeny tiny infinitesimal dewdrop in the fulfillment of this interest, but it's what's up. So if we look to the center of the eye, most of us, if not all of us, I'm sure there's some gurus around and other highly evolved people, but we take our eye for granted. We just throw I around and identify ourselves as a single I randomly. And it's usually not an identification of self. It's usually an identification of what's going on in the territory of the I of which you are speaking. So we'll say things like in one of our classes the other day, somebody said, I was so depressed, I was so down, and then I just wasn't anymore. And I said, what if those were two separate I's? What if they were different territories of being? What if they were different aspects of self? So that's like the baseline of the conversation. Will be exploring in the magician of self and then contributing it to the public. So the I that's a we is the you and me, whether it's the you of a collective or whether it's the you of an individual. And I think Deb pointed to that. Who am I with another in the field? In other words, who am I in a shared field of interest, a shared field of resonance, a shared field of comprehension, a shared field of information, a shared field of experience? Who am I there? What is my, we could even say role. What is mine to do, mine to be in that identification? Then we have the they, because there are others, both Deb and I and Liz addressed that the families were born into, it was a they, because we didn't comprehend them. And I think Deb also alluded to, this is probably not anything we're going to work on going in, but there are a lot of people that don't like me, and there are people that think I'm quite arrogant, and people that think that I have a position about them that I don't, because I don't ever remember arguments. I don't ever remember positions. I'm like the 51st dates. It's part of my MO, part of my design of being, is I only seem to live in the present moment of now, seeing a future that's organizing itself from the present moment of now, not from the past. But so this present cultural collapse we're in is because there's a they that isn't interrelated, symbiotic, interrelated, or interactive with our individual nature. Very complex. But in the next recursion of being, and then these are levels of being, frequency levels, higher and higher, more expanded frequency levels. What would it be like if there was a they and a we and an us? What would you be there? So in the field of Tantra Maat, one of the things we work with is alliance. Alliances, because I myself, my independent, my what do you call it, Deb? My individuated self, thank you. My individuated self is interested in the we, they, us. That's alliance, regardless of beliefs, regardless of the territories we're tending to. What's the alliance among multi-dimensional natures of being, restoring life here? And then the it is basically these quantum natures. Our planet's a quantum nature. The cosmos is a quantum nature. The angelic realm is a quantum nature. The ascended masters is a quantum nature. The elemental kingdom is a quantum nature. The primordial forces of air, wind, fire, water, metal is a quantum system. How we language God, generating, organizing designs of creation, is a quantum system that unfortunately has been has been separated from itself and individuated in human beings. So it becomes a source of conflict, not a source of many faces of the divine, or many faces of creation. So the I am that is what we're after. We're after your personality to have a capacity to access its multidimensional nature, so that we can draw from many dimensions of existence that once existed here, like the priest and the priestesses of ancient times. They took care of their families and made their food and put their kids to bed, but the minute they stepped in that temple, they were the being of their direct relationship with the forces of creation, of which they were a part. And yet they could walk out of it, state shift, into the being that took care of the stub toe of their child. That's what we're after. Why am I not? This is not a preamble to a course. This isn't get to a point where I ask you for money. It's not. This is exploratory. This is keeping up with the times. This is making sure that those of us that are at work in many different ways have the opportunity to contribute what we're exploring. If you want to do in-depth work, you're welcome to contact me at theoffice@tantramaat.com, and I will set you up with a mentor, because you'll be 3 months in, so you can catch up with the terminology we use, not the learning, but the terminology being used, so that if you do want to take on being a magician of self and doing that exploration, it's a subscription information. In other words, I'm like Yoda. Don't finish your training. Don't leave your training until it's done. And done is the December of 2024. At least the first layer of done is 2024. So we want to hear from you at Dr. Deb at thevitalpsyche.com. We want your stories. We want your questions. We want to bring this into a cohesive event. That's what Deb was addressing, which was talking about. It seems like everywhere we go, we're finding information that's correlate with what's coming up in our own psyche. That's a very exciting thing.
Mm-hmm.
That means a unified field of consciousness is restoring itself in human being. It's not all broken up like we see the cacophony. And that's why the cacophony of separation and conflict and I'm right and you're wrong is getting stronger and stronger and stronger, because it's like being squeezed like let's say a boil, sorry for the analogy. It's getting squeezed until it just can't exist anymore. So it's hyperactive right at the moment. So that's it. I hope to meet once a month. I haven't discussed this with them. I have a tendency of starting things without asking people if they want to participate. And but I'd love to do it twice a month if you all participate. If you send an email to Deb and say, would you all talk about this, or would you look about this, or this is what came up for me? Could you engage with what you're perceiving more thoroughly? Because these designs of interactive, interrelated, symbiotic activity, we have to find a way to keep formulating them out past the Western tradition of you get to pay me for it. How silly. How incredibly silly. You do have to pay me for the Magician of Self, and you do have to pay me for the engagements and the activations, but not this. Not this. Every one of us that's doing private work that is realizing the intensity and the importance of this period of time is making sure we're in the public eye also, so we can contribute to the whole as well as take care of our own well-being financially. Anything, Deb and Liz? We're right at the top of the hour.
There's a lot that came up as you were showing the image, but I can't start because I can't get close enough to finishing a sentence or three
I'm
or
just
five.
I'm just excited to be in
Yeah,
the we of this creation that we're creating here. So yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you all. May you have a precious day.
yes.